Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to Riding the Wave. I'm John Schilling, and I'm the community editor of the Wave newspaper, Rockaway's newspaper since 1893. And today on the program, we're joined by New York State Senator James Sanders Jr. Senator, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm riding the wave. I'm feeling good. I'm in the Rockaways and riding the wave. So what more can you ask for out of life?
There you go. There you go. Now, Senator, like I just said a little earlier before we hit record, I want to hop right into the interview. I want to ask you some questions. You've been in office for a long time now, and yeah, it's one way to put it, right? How has your campaign for reelection this time around gone so far? It's the second election in which residents of the entire peninsula will vote in your race. And as of 2 years ago, obviously, your district now includes all of Rockaway and all of its neighborhoods. So as Election Day draws near and early voting is underway, how are you feeling?
I feel great. I'm excited to hear from my neighbors, and I'm excited. For years, we in the Rockaways have been saying that we need to have one elected position, and I've never really been in favor of that, to be honest. I always enjoyed having a second vote in the Senate when I was over different issues of the Rockaways, and it was always good to have an automatic second vote. However, greater minds than the both of ours have chosen, and I am blessed to join with my neighbors. I live out here, so it's I'm no stranger to it, but it's always good to hear from my neighbors, east to west.
Now, Senator, this election also marks another significance. It's the first time that you're facing off against a Republican challenger in Michael
Actually, I faced Republicans before.
for the state Senate.
Oh, for the state senate? No,
Yeah, I
no,
should
no.
have
You're right.
specified
You're
that.
right.
Yeah, for the state Senate, yeah. Has that changed your approach though at all in terms of campaigning and engaging with voters?
No, no, you don't change because of you see, the best election is good service to the people. The best way to win an election is if you have just been delivering to the people, you don't have to worry about it. It's like a test in school. If you do the homework, you don't have to worry about the test. And we've done the homework, and I'm just coming from IS 53 where we cut the ribbon today on a we helped them. We did a $5 million rebuilding of their auditorium. You should see it. And we cut the ribbon today. These are the type of things that people want to have happen in their community, but everything is not fun. We also have been working on making sure that Snake Road, that infamous Snake Road, that we have a plan and that we rebuild it. As all of us know in the Rockaways, that is such a dangerous little area. Brookville Boulevard, the proper name, and nobody could do anything there because it was city, state, and federal. And that means everybody pointed the finger, and nothing could be done. It took us a year and a half, but we got all of the battered heads together and got everybody, and we have now a $3.5 million study. In the government, nothing is done without a study. And for 40 years, there had been no study. We are going for the big money that so we can elevate that road and things of that nature. But I'm sorry, I digress. I just got a lot to say, and I let me yield it back to you so we can have a dialogue.
Yeah, no problem, Senator. No problem at all. I think it's good that you brought up earlier in the interview this idea of one peninsula, one Rockaway, and how you weren't necessarily in
Yes.
favor of that at first. So I want to ask you, one piece of criticism that your opponent has put out there is that you don't spend any time or enough time on the western side of the peninsula. He said in an interview recently with us, and I'll give you the exact quote, "Our current senator just isn't doing anything for us. He doesn't show up at all." How do you respond to that criticism, and what is your pitch to voters on the western side of the peninsula to assure them that you do and will represent them?
Well, I understand. Having been in an insurgent myself, I understand that you have to say something when you're running against a person. You have to give a reason why you're running. And sadly, it leads some people to hyperbole, or they exaggerate things or create things. And maybe at the moment he believes it, but in another moment, after this election is over. Now, remember that the Rockaways is roughly 1/3 of the district.
Right.
1/3. And that means that you have 2/3 of a district that is not here. And as a person proudly from the Rockaways, you always have to watch the criticism that you only do for the Rockaways. So you're never going to you try to find the sweet spot, the balance. So instead of going to just you know empty spots, I'd rather be working with people to solve what are the issues of the problem. I recently went to the fire station in Breezy Point and was speaking with them about the issue of they need new fire trucks, new vehicles. And while they missed my budget session, uh, I've committed that I'm going to buy them at least one and perhaps two fire trucks for the communities around Breezy Point. Now that's a life and death issue. That's more than just showing up and smiling at babies. All of those things are nice, but if you're not dealing with the issue of the flooding that we have out here, if you're not dealing with those things, then you're cheating the public. And as an outsider, you could say anything. You could say, I'm going to pave the streets with gold. I'm going to do all kinds of stuff, which my opponent, I'm sure, has said it somewhere. But as an elected official, my job is to deliver, to under promise and over deliver. And that's what we like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Senator, I had this a little bit further down on my list of questions, but since you brought up flooding, I think it's appropriate to bring up that it just happens to be a coincidence. We're recording this on the anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. And
Incredible.
yeah, and earlier this year, you hosted a town hall in regard to flooding throughout Rockaway. I was there. And, I wanted to just bring that up because I wanted to ask you, what were some of the takeaways from that event? And, what are you and other legislators on the state level doing to address, climate change and flooding protections to ensure that the destruction that happened 12 years ago, that we can minimize it, that it doesn't happen again?
Well, in a few minutes, I'm going to be at the memorial. There's a memorial on 100, I think 119th Street or something of that nature. So I'll probably see you there also. So I was here during that incredible period, Superstorm Sandy, and as a good Marine, I didn't leave. I stayed in my house, and then I saw 5 feet of water come into my basement, and I said, my God gave us fear for a reason. um and we immediately began the process of fighting back. Before the rain finished, I had ordered my office to open. My people said, with what? There's no electricity, it's raining. I said, drag the tables outside, use umbrellas if you have to, but open. And let me take a moment to thank the American people. We put out a SOS to the American people by this new media, the internet. And we said, we have nothing here. And we need help. There was no government, from my point of view, failed us dismally. There was no emergency service, and none of these guys, I did not see them for the first 5 days. We put out an SOS to the American people. They delivered. We got big FedExes filled with things. My only regret is I did not take the names of the people so that I could thank them personally. We were so busy giving this stuff and trying to meet the needs of people that maybe it's good in one sense, because some people have problems with the American people. I don't. I know that the American people, white, black, Latino, whatever we find ourselves, respond to their fellow citizens. I can only say what happened. folk from towns and places where they probably never seen a black guy responded and put out their hearts and made sure that community that they never seen were well. So to directly address your issue, I'm personally fighting on the issue of a Snake Road to make sure that we have an exit point and to make sure that our exits are marked. I'm also concerned about we need to be planting trees and things of that nature, resilience issues, water gardens and things of that nature. I'm speaking with the governor's office about buying some people out. They're too far into the shoreline, if you wish, especially on the bay side. And we can't protect these folk. We need to take some of those homes away, return it to wetlands so that they can act as a sponge for and save the rest of us. So there's a lot of things that we're actually doing on this one. And I'm delighted to speak of it. And perhaps I'll come back on another day so you can ask more questions, especially about banking and other issues that you may have some questions about. But if you want to stay on this line of thinking, I don't mind. I've got plenty to say, but I'm trying to respect you in the audience.
No, absolutely. And Senator, I have to question if maybe you have a copy of my questions in front of you, because you seem to be predicting everything that I'm going to ask next. Banking
Well,
is
these
tough.
when I tilt my glasses this way, I could actually see. I wish that were true.
You can see right through the computer, right? Yeah. So now, Senator, yeah, like you just said, one thing I want to note is that you are the chair of the New York State Senate Banks Committee. And of course,
Yes.
as you're aware, you've spoken about it, you've written about it. Far Rockaway is a banking desert. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and banks have closed. I think the most recent one that comes to mind is the Chase Bank at Arvin by the Sea.
Yes.
And we've heard from residents who are frustrated who have to leave the peninsula to bank. And so
Sad.
I would just ask you, are there any legislative efforts or ongoing discussions underway about addressing that issue? Could Far Rockaway see a new bank, an MDI, or a credit union in the near future?
First, let me give you bad news, then let me give you good news.
Sure.
Um, like all the other residents of the Rockaways, I am so frustrated. I am the chair of the state banking committee. And the banks that have left, like Chase, have a federal, they're federally registered. They're not state oversight. I have not lost a single state bank in my term. I've gained several state banks in different parts of the district. It's the federal banks that I have no oversight over. I can't tell them what to do. And it is frustrating, but I would encourage people to direct federal questions to federal people. And anyone who says that they want to be a leader should understand jurisdiction. If you say that you want to lead at the state level, then why are you promising things at a federal level that you won't be able to do? You either don't understand the issue or you're making false promises to people, and we shouldn't do that. Now, one of the problems that we're having in banking nationwide is that the banks are finding it cheaper to go and more efficient to go to the internet. They are doing far, far more banking by internet. So banks throughout the nation, throughout the world, are contracting. They're getting fewer and fewer banks. Now, that's a terrible thing, but that I would argue that opens up possibilities. If the large banks don't want to do these communities, then let's get the smaller banks, the state banks, and let's get the credit unions to get in here. Now, part of the problem that we're dealing with is these smaller banks and the credit unions are saying that the money that the state has in it is not worth it. And incidentally, for years, the large banks did not allow credit unions to be part of what's called the banking development districts. The state has certain monies to encourage banks to come in, but the large banks did not allow credit unions to come in. My law allows them to come in. I fought for years to say, wait a minute, if you guys are not coming in, then let these guys come in. You get first crack, go for it. But if you don't want to come in, then allow these guys to come in. It took a lot of fighting, but we were able to make that happen. But now everybody's saying that it's not enough money in it, that we have to figure ways of increasing it. So that's the next level of the fight that I'm going to do, to try to bring it to that sweet spot where the credit unions and the banks will say that it's worth coming to these communities. And you do that by the state leaving monies there so that we can make these things happen. Rockaways is a beautiful place, but it's so unforgiving. So I'm very leery of telling you of my efforts that are underway, even as we speak. I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver again. We're working on it. We're closer than most people think. It should have happened 400 years ago. I mean, if I had my way.
Fair enough, Senator. And I think another fight, just not the fight for more banking in the district, but another fight that you're going to be taking on very soon, if you haven't already, but I know that you have, is the Trauma Center in Far Rockaway.
Oh my.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussions about that. You've been at all the rallies, all the activism and all that kind of stuff surrounding it. Now that Councilwoman Brooks Powers was able to secure a chunk of funding from the city budget towards that effort, can you speak to what you plan to do to continue that advocacy and what your message to Governor Hochul is going to be to ensure that the Trauma Center can become a reality?
Now, I am really a fan of responsible government, and I'll show it by saying the buck stops here. The councilwoman has done a magnificent effort in getting us this far. The problem is the state health department has its own algorithms and its own figures, and by its calculations, we're not eligible for a trauma 1 center, a trauma 2 center. And if we fight this by way of just eligibility, we're going to lose. However, politics is the art of bringing home the bacon, and politics is the art of getting the yes. We are going to the governor at the state level and saying we want to speak of need. We don't want to speak of algorithms. We want to speak of this. We need to think of the Rockaways, not just Far Rockaway, of course, the Rockaways as an island for all practical purposes. And we are isolated from all of these things. And of course, we will bring up the name and memory of our beloved officer who gave his life in the Rockaways, and who perhaps could have been saved had we a trauma center here. So under those conditions, this is part of what you can hold us accountable for, sir. I don't try to go away from response. I don't mind people holding me accountable for what I do and what I should do. And this is an area, first we have to get to the governor. And that's difficult. We got to get to her people. I don't have much faith that just speaking to her people are going to do anything. They're going to show you facts and figures, their facts, their figures. You've got to get to the governor and you've got to get to her and say, look, this is a political issue. Forget all the rest of that stuff. After a while, you got to play hardball in this business, and we don't mind playing hardball, and that can lead to the breakthrough. It can also lead you to being, persona non grata with the person not wanted with the governor and her people, but that's fine. That's fine. She has a right. I work for the people of the Rockaways. I don't work for the governor, and their needs has to be first. And I'll say it as nice as she'll allow me, but we will be insistent until we get some type of trauma center. It may not be a trauma one, maybe we can't win that one, but hey, a trauma two or trauma three, we got to have something to save people's lives. And that's what we're about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of the governor, Senator, to bring up, pivot to our next topic, one of the most widely covered accomplishments in the Senate has been the passage of your bill to establish, and I want to make sure I get this right, the New York State Community Commission on Reparations Remedies. And that was signed into law late last year. That commission met over the summer and started that conversation of addressing the legacy of slavery and that injustice and how it has continued. On the topic of reparations, you've previously said that the check is the least amount of the least of the things that we're talking about. You can't put a dollar amount on the misery that our people have suffered. So with that in mind, my question is twofold. One, are you satisfied with the commission's progress so far? And two, as people theorize about dollar amounts and how that money would be collected and distributed, what do you think reparations should look like? Maybe clear up some misconceptions.
Gladly, gladly. It is one of my most proud accomplishments, very difficult to do. The difficulty is to solve a past and present injustice without creating more injustice. I'm very sensitive to the idea that I want to make sure that innocent people are not victimized by attempts to solve injustice. The commission is to explore the slavery and its aftermath, slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, etc. Its aftermath that lasts until this day, and to see a couple of things. First and foremost, are there grounds for reparations? Are there grounds that the state should have done things or should have prevented things? So that's the first thing it has to do. It has to make a case. It can come back and say there's no grounds for this, and we'll have to live with that, because if you appoint a fair commission and you empower them, then you got to live with the results. So let's assume they come back and say that there are grounds for it. Let's imagine that. Then they give a bunch of recommendations, a series of recommendations, anything from health to education to whatever we don't tell them what to do. They will come up with their recommendations. After that point, it will go back to the legislature. And there I will have to win over many of the people in government on these issues, including my friends who are Republicans, or my friends who are conservative Democrats, my friends who are whatever we find ourselves in. And we need to do this respectfully. We need to do this with the idea that their opinion is just as worthy as anybody else's opinion, that they may see it vastly different. And we have to speak of not just the education or the history of the thing, but if a thing is ongoing now, how do we make it work? So it is a complex thing, but we're going to do a hearing on this. I'm very proud to say in I think late December in the district. It will probably be in the Rochdale. I couldn't get it to the Rockaways.
As long as it's in the district, right?
Yeah. Oh, hey, listen, it's got to be in my district now.
Yeah.
Probably in Rochdale Center, which is big enough to hold 600 people or so. But I'm encouraging people to come out with their positions on this, even if their position is against it. They have a right, and it is my duty as an elected official to make sure that they are respected as they give their position. Right, wrong, or do you agree or disagree? Everybody will be respected in this process. This is an American process. And as an American citizen, I take it very, very serious. as an elected official, mine is the job of upholding everybody, the whole spectrum of thought. Um, so so at the end of everything, I have to sell it to my fellow elected officials, and they are of mixed views on these things, and I respect that, and I look forward to the conversation, and I will stop this part of it so that we can go on to your questions. Although I could speak of this for hours, sir.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Obviously, I understand that. Yeah, and we'll have follow-up interviews down the line, and we'll talk
Good,
about this more,
good.
I'm sure, especially, as you said, with the event coming up in December, the hearing, we'll be reporting about this and we'll be talking about it much more, I'm
Hey,
sure.
hey, let me challenge you. On
Sure.
another day when we do this, ask me the the three best arguments against reparation. Now that on another day,
On another
uh,
day.
and how I answer those.
For sure. Absolutely. And this is not so much a great transition, but just to keep the conversation moving to my next question. Senator, you were one of the things that your colleague, Assemblywoman Stacey Pfeffer Amato, has been heavily criticized for is her vote in favor of the budget package that included legislation to adopt no cash bail back in 2019. The Assemblywoman has previously said that the legislation went sideways from what it was intended to accomplish initially. So you were one of the co-sponsors on that legislation as well. And I wanted to ask you for your take on that vote. If you agree with the Assemblywoman and if you regret your vote and, given rises in crime and recidivist offenders, just how do you respond to that?
Well, no, I don't regret my vote. I'm more of a constitutionalist on this. I understand that the reason for bail is to ensure that people come back to court. That's the only reason for bail. It's not for punishment. It's not for any of these. It's not for issues of safety or any of these other issues. The purpose of bail, as defined by the legal system, is to ensure that people come back to court. Now, let's imagine you for a moment have found yourself in a bad situation, and now you are an innocent man, and you are in the court system. May that never happen, but imagine. Under those conditions, I'm very concerned about your rights. Your right not to be given some type of $100 million bail or $3 million, $5 million bail, which will make you unable to get out of court, to get out of jail. So just as I have to be concerned about your rights, I have to be concerned about everyone's rights. If the court looks at the situation and says that a person is not a flight risk, they're not going to never show up, then they should be given either no bail or a reasonable bail based on the crime itself. Now, many of these issues that people have is that they don't understand the issue. Now, if you say that you want to tackle crime, I'm with you. And as a Marine, we're not noted to be the most lenient towards crime. We don't. This is one thing me and my opponent share, and I wish him well in that. I'm very proud of my opponent that he is seeing it himself as a good Marine to get out there and try to make a difference in his community. So I commend him for that. I'm very proud. I think that veterans have a place to we have much that we can add to this conversation out here. So I applaud him, and I applaud all of these folk who are doing, these veterans. So on the issue of cash bail, I think that you're tackling it wrong. If there's issues of crime, then you need to tackle that, and don't just say, let's give unreasonable bails because we can throw the key away and don't have to worry about any of that. That's you're breaking the law, my friends, when you do stuff like that. You're not, and it's immoral and illegal. Why don't we all take an even playing field and say, this is the law. Let us obey the law. Those who don't obey it, we will punish them, sometimes severely, depending on their crime. But we're not going to, none of us are above the law. The police are not above the law. The courts, none of us electeds, none of us are above the law. Otherwise, you have a society that's very unequal, where if you have money, if you're born into the Trump family and you can pay incredible figures, then even you could be as guilty as sin, and yet you're walking the street. But if you're a poor guy, and even if there were so many people who were held in jail in Rikers for bails of 300 and 400 and 500, things that you and I would say, my God, that's doable. But for them, it wasn't. Now, when you're in jail, what do? You lose your apartment, you lose your job, you lose all of these things. And you're pushing people towards crime instead of dealing with the issue of crime. The issue is more complex than a simple, we're just going to bring back cash bail. I mean, it's an oversimplification of a very difficult issue, and it's disrespectful to the people who need to know the reasons why things are going on so that we can really address the problem and deal with the issue of crime.
And Senator, on that note, let me bring up another difficult issue that your opponent has also put at the center of his campaign, the migrant crisis.
Oh my!
Yeah, yeah. Which
Ooh,
I'm sure.
I need a drink first.
Go ahead, take a sip. You voted in favor of the bill.
It's juice, my friend. Just juice.
Good to clarify, right? Yeah. And I got water, so we're all covered. Okay.
Okay.
You voted in favor of the bill that allocated $2.4 billion toward helping the city manage the migrant crisis. And I'm sure your office has heard from constituents about the shelter at Floyd Bennett Field. I know that that's outside of your district, but nearby the Rockaway Peninsula. So I want to ask you, what is your opinion on how the state and even the city, by extension, has addressed the migrant crisis? And can you explain a bit more about why you voted the way that you did?
I'm not happy with how the nation has handled the migrant crisis. I'm not happy with how I would argue that the Biden administration was slow on the issue, nor am I happy with how the Republicans blocked a bill on immigration that could have handled much of these things. I think that we're letting all of the politics get in the way of dealing with people. And I'm first and foremost, I'm speaking about my residents. And then I'm speaking about the new folk coming in here, the migrants. But there's migrants not simply at Floyd Bennett Field, at just about all of the local hotels. Remember, I got my district has all of the hotels around Kennedy Airport, and there are shelters in the Rockaways that we have migrants. So I want to make sure that these folk are not wandering the streets, and that we process them as quickly as we can. Those who have a legitimate issue of political fear, fleeing from persecution, we absolutely should embrace them, open our arms and embrace them, take them in and process them as quickly as we can. Those who have no fear and are not bringing anything positive, we need to process them too and get them out of here as quickly as we can. And that's why I put money forward to do just that. Process folk, make sure that they're not wandering our streets. I have received so many calls, and I actually put in a word for and a group on the mainland called UNCA, United Neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They brought me out. They said that there's a migrant problem at one of the hotels that were right across from their homes. So I called them up on it. I went there at 3 a.m. to see if what they were saying was true. My God, it was true. That these folk were there was very little oversight over this particular shelter, this hotel. And my colleague was actually accosted. Some women, we believe, tried to offer him prostitution, tried to do that type of stuff. We immediately got in touch with the shelter system and gave what we saw and said, listen, this is a mess. And this is why you can't just be against a thing. You got to say what you're for. It's cute and easy to just be, I'm against the migrants, as my opponent and others do. But what are you for? You got to make sure that the system has enough money to process people in a proper way, to oversee and make sure that we can send guards or whoever else we need to make sure that our neighbors, your neighbors, me and you and I are safe here. Even as we are trying to be as just and moral and good and decent with people who are good and decent. But to those who don't understand our laws and don't want to understand our laws, we got to process them out. And that's got to move faster than ever before. So yes, I absolutely gave money to do that.
And Senator, we're running out of time on the clock a little bit, but one
Oh
last
my.
question I want to ask you, and I'll do it in just a few words to give you some time to respond, is, you just said just now you want to make sure that voters are aware of what you stand for, what, other people stand for, whether it's you or another elected official. Besides doing an interview like this, and maybe appearing at a candidate's night, what are some of the things that you've done to make sure that you get that message out? We had previously invited you to participate in a debate with your opponent, Michael O'Reilly. So I'll also ask, what was your reason for deciding not to debate, not to participate, and what have you been doing instead to get the message out there?
Well, every place I go, in fact, just at the ribbon cutting today, I alerted people that there was an election coming up. Now, since I was at a school, of course, I could not say vote Republican, Democrat, whatever. I did say that there's an election coming up, and early voting is now, actually. And so one of the things I have done is to ensure that every place I go, I have told people that it is coming up. And I'm really a stickler here, where I have said, I don't care who you vote for. If you have the right as a citizen to vote, you should exercise that vote. And I commend everybody who's voting, whether you vote for me or don't vote for me, I commend you. Or even if you didn't vote on, for any senator in the Senate race, there are so many other races. So under those conditions, I have been spending my time with the needs of the people of our community, whether it is Brookville Road, whether it is cutting this ribbon, whether it is the day-to-day issue, the trauma centers. Those are the type of places that you will find me, and not at
Senator?
shrill. Oh,
I don't mean to interrupt. We're just at the 22nd
as you
mark.
must, as you
So
must.
I want to thank you publicly before the recording cuts off. Thank you so much for taking some time to answer questions. Best of luck on Election Day, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. And I'll be seeing you in a little bit at the memorial too. So thank you.
You can ask me more questions. Take care. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.